At the things that people want. So then you could ask, well, you should have just got more of it. You should have got a bigger apartment. You should have got a better car. You should have got, a prettier girlfriend. I started to think, well, is that really it? Is that the goal? Is it to get bigger and broader and supersized? Is that the win? And so fortunately, I said, you know what? I don't think there's anything of this world that I can purchase that will actually make me feel whole and connected.
The Grateful Podcast with Jack Wagoner presents. Subscribe.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Grateful Podcast. I'm your host, Jack Wagoner, and today I'm joined by Raghunath Cappo. Ray has lived many lives: punk rocker, 6 years as a monk, yoga teacher, and spiritual mentor. Today, he co-hosts the daily podcast, Wisdom of the Sages, and recently released his memoir, From Punk to Monk. From leading the legendary bands of Youth of Today and Shelter to immersing himself in the ancient wisdom of Bhakti yoga, Raghunath has been on a lifelong journey of transformation, and I'm truly grateful to have the honor of speaking with him today. So, Raghunath, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, so Raghunath, you can call me Raghunath, you can call me Ray. Raghunath is like a sort of a guru given name. It's sort of like you get that in India when you practice for a while. Your teacher almost gives you like a second birth where you see yourself as, like, for example, Raghunath is a name for Ram, which is a name for God in India. So you say Raghunath Das. It means like the servant of God. And it's like that. It's like a second birth. Our first birth is our material birth. We understand who our family is, what our ethnicity is, what our culture of the body. I'm Italian, American, New Yorker. But then you go through what's like called a second birth, so to speak. I guess every culture has that. Bar mitzvahs or indigenous cultures have this like coming of age, but it's the same type of idea. You're more connected with who you are spiritually more than materially. So Raghunath is my name, but Ray Cappo is also my name. That's my birth name.
Yeah, so when I looked you up, I looked up Raghunath, and then it came up Ray Cappo, American musician. And I'm like, you've done all this stuff, and it still has you down as a musician as your number one thing on Google.
Occupation. Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
Yeah. So I'm 18. So looking at your story, at my age, you were starting to get into the punk rock scene. How'd you get into that?
I actually got into it even younger, like when I was like 15 or 16. And I had older brothers and sisters that lived in New York City. I grew up in the suburbs of Connecticut. And I just sort of got sick of sort of corporate music, corporate rock, arena rock, and just like where everybody sort of seemed monocropped in the way they live and the way they dress and the music they listen to. And so when you go to New York City, it opens up a whole plethora of different ideas and thoughts and fashion and diets and spirituality and spiritual practices. And so I think being exposed to that at a young age, it just turned me on to different types of music. And then when I started going to see bands playing live who wrote their own songs as opposed to being, oftentimes in high school, if your friends are in a band, they're playing like Led Zeppelin songs or just cover songs of other bands. So to see bands play live and playing their own music, I was really impressed. And I was sort of musically inclined. So at a young age, I just sort of started a band as a teenager. And then I think when I was 18 or 19, that's when my first band got a little popular, Youth of Today, and we started touring that band all over the world, really.
That's so cool. So I was listening to your podcast with, I forget if it was on with Rich Rohr or Joe Rogan, where you said that you never thought you were greedy until you started to like feel that material success, and that's when you realized that you did crave the money you could get out of it, and it wasn't a purely like passion-based motivation. You had some sort of material motivation. I thought that was super interesting how you started to notice that once you felt success with your band.
Yeah, sometimes I see it a lot with not just myself, but in a lot of us. Like when sometimes you get sometimes the very thing you're passionate about, when it's sort of uncorrupt, like you're not making any money, you're just doing because for the love of it. something gets a little almost indecent once you add, like, okay, let's get on a progressive path towards success, and you get caught up in the trippings of, this is what all spiritual practices talk about: greed, lust, anger, competition. These are things that can really, like, almost like shatter your heart, even from something you're passionate about, because those things trip you up. So I had to realize, like, oh, and I mentioned that because a lot of the spiritual books I was studying a lot of books on metaphysics and spirituality and Christ consciousness and Krishna consciousness and Buddhism. And so a lot of the books they study, they talk about these very similar trip lines that people fall over and stumble and wreck their life or get caught in these glue traps, so to speak. And I was thinking, well, okay, greed. I'm not really greedy. I don't, I'm not making any money. I just love to do this stuff. But then as soon as you add money or competition to the equation, you realize how actually those things are actually deep rooted in us. So I was thinking, well, I must, at that time in my neophyte stage of practice, I realized, oh, I'm not greedy. That's crazy. But sometimes all we have to do is be tempted. Sometimes people, they hate the government, they hate greed, or there's something like that. And then all of a sudden, if they were given that opportunity where they had power, then maybe they wouldn't be as pure as they think they are. So it made me realize, like, actually, I'm in the thick of all these issues that all spiritual paths are talking about. And there needs to be some self-work there as well. I'm not saying indulge or surround yourself by temptations, but I'm saying notice that we may not be as pure at heart as we think we are. And I think that's sort of what shined light that I needed to do more self-introspection, self-work, etc.
That's really interesting. Well, a lot of people, I think, get to the point where they think they need to do something spiritually, but you actually took a step and went to India and became a monk. That's a step that almost nobody takes. And as a young person who's interested in, I meditate, I do things, but in a very Western way. Like I meditate 10 to 15, 20 minutes a day on a good day, and that's nothing compared to like what you went and did. So I'm really curious, is what drove you to take such a drastic step in that direction?
I'm not recommending everybody does it, but for me, I think it was something that it had a very loud calling at a time in my life where getting all my material desires fulfilled did not satisfy me, and also wanting to find purpose and wanted to find, like, okay, what is my offering in this short life? It was sort of also blended with an untimely death of my father, which made me really sort of question, like, what is a win here? What is the home run? That we just pop out a bunch of kids? Is that the goal of life? I mean, chickens and frogs do that. Is that where we're going with this, or is it to be adventurous? Is it to become famous? Or is it to make lots of money? Is it to just travel the world? And so it made me question, what is purpose? What is a win in this human life? Because my father did one path. He was very responsible. He was, he lived a noble life. He took care of a bunch of kids. He never had a bunch of money. And he had a humble, noble profession of a school teacher. And he died untimely. And I thought, well, did he miss the mark, or is that the mark? And so it really made me question, what do I want to do with this very short existence? Sometimes when we see people die that we're close to, it's not just the grief of the loss of the person, but oftentimes it's like, wow, that could have been me. It makes us realize our own mortality and our own very, very short time on this planet. And hopefully it's not just like a flash in the pan, like I'm very sober about material existence for 2 days, and then I'm back to normal, back on the grind or back on the treadmill, etc. Hopefully, it's sort of like it makes you think, it makes you pivot, it makes you maybe perhaps change the trajectory of what you want to do. So I think that that his untimely death mixed with sort of losing faith in material pursuits. I wasn't rich, but I had enough money I could buy what I wanted. I didn't have a penthouse, but I had my own, good priced apartment in Manhattan. You know, um, I had a girlfriend. I had the things that people want. So then you could ask, well, you should have just got more of it. You should have got a bigger apartment. You should have got a better car. You should have got, a prettier girlfriend. You should have got all these things that make you sound like, how can I take this up a notch? And I started to think, well, is that really it? Is that the goal? Is it to get bigger and broader and more like a bolder and supersized? Is that the win? And so fortunately, I feel it's fortunate that I said, you know what? I don't think there's anything of this world that I can purchase that will actually make me feel whole and connected. And I already had a foundation of spirituality for the previous 4 years. I've been just reading books and trying to apply, like yourself, meditational practices, etc. And I thought, and that was sort of like a pinch between the death and that success. I just said, you know what? No, I don't want to play this role like I'm a leader of a band where people are looking up to me for advice, and I myself am a little lost. It's like, if I don't have one hand connected to the boat, how am I going to reach out and, give, I was a band that was speaking about, self-control, discipline, an ethical message. We were straight edge, we were vegetarian, had positive attitudes, but at the same time, I felt like, who am I going to help? I don't know anything. I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I mean, I appreciate it. People are getting off drugs. People are getting off drinking. That's good. That's a good thing. But I know that's just a threshold of something greater. I'm reading these books by like masters and renunciates and mystics. I was like, I definitely don't have what they have. I was like, why are these people following me? I'm just like, I'm a novice. And so for me, I realized I don't want to teach anymore. I just want to shut up and listen. Does that make sense? Can you guys turn off your Wi-Fi, please, in the house? Can everybody turn off their Wi-Fi? I thought he was listening attentively, but he's frozen. Hey.
Oh, there
sorry.
we go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there we go. I don't know if that's on my end or your end, but
I think it's on my end, and I just had everybody in the household turn off their Wi-Fi.
okay. Thank you.
I was like, man, this guy listens so attentively. It's as if he's in meditation right now. Like, wait a second, the screen's just frozen.
I was listening you had my attention until it went away.
Okay, sorry. So anyway, I hope you
You're all
got
good.
my closing statement there.
Yeah. I think what's so interesting is how you said you hope that people like get nudged on this path and stay there and don't fall back. But something I've realized is people have a real recency bias in the things that affect them and how they think about the world. And so, I mean, people that I know that have had things happen to them where they're reminded of their mortality, it's really rare for that to stay prevalent in their mind for a long time.
Sure.
I know, yeah, like if I get off my meditation practice for I don't know, a few days, I feel more lost than I was before.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting how do you keep something relevant in your mind, keep this motivation relevant?
Oh, that's a good question. One way is you have community, you have friends, you have partners, you have in relationships that are also keeping the main thing.
Yeah.
You have a support system, and I think as you like sort of indulge in wisdom literature, the less it's almost like eating clean. The more you eat clean, the less you want a Coca-Cola, the less you want a junky junk food or candy bar or a greasy piece of pizza. The more you eat clean, the more you want to stay clean, and that affects you.
Yeah.
And then the more you want to work out, the more you want to be healthy. So it's one of these things that they feed each other. So the first thing is you got to be careful who you hang out with, who you date, who you associate with, who's in your life on a regular basis, who your best friends are, because we're not just giving them our company, but we're receiving their company. And so, sometimes we're born into a family, and then then as we get older, we also can choose our own family. We can choose who we bring into our lives and who to say, you know what, I've grown out of this relationship with this person. I really have nothing in common with them anymore.
Right.
And we just joked, and our humor was based on degrading things, nothing uplifting. And I want to be a different person. And just like if you want to be a virtuoso musician, you have to sometimes start to associate with people who are also very musically inclined, who also see the importance of practice when everybody's playing. Or if you want to be a great swimmer, then you got to swim in the morning before school and then swim after school. And to some people, it seems sort of extreme. But if you're very focused, like, that's what I want, then all of a sudden you think, this is actually important. And then you find other people who also realize, no, that is important. And so you do narrow down a lot of your options, but you become sort of great at something. So spiritual paths are the same sense. You want to be with people who realize, like, okay, this life is short. I don't want to waste time. There's a lot of people in the world just wasting time. Culture is set up for us to waste time. And so we have to be a little stronger than our senses and stronger than our mind. And there's certain disciplines you can do that help that. But really the number one thing is the company that you keep and the type of food that you feed your mind with. The media, right? You're called the Grateful Podcast. I already can tell it's probably a good podcast I'd like to listen to. But, the type of podcast, the type of media that you consume, the movies you consume, the TV shows you consume on a regular basis, it forms our consciousness. Mm-hmm. People have nightmares, but they, watch or listen to true crime podcasts. Of course you have nightmares. It's all about murder. People watch these TV shows on murder, or horror movies. Of course it's going to affect your consciousness. You're not going to trust people. You're always thinking it's just like we are feeding ourselves, and you become what you feed yourself upon.
I think so many people want to achieve something without putting in the work to get there. So,
yeah.
like, people want to have this. Many people are probably very envious of the way you feel as a result of being a monk and having that spiritual practice and the clarity you probably feel and the liberation. But what people aren't jealous of is the work you put in. And what a lot of media is all about, in salesmanship and everything, is how can I achieve an amazing result without sacrificing anything?
Yeah, I'm with you. It's like a cheater's way, and it's sort of like you reap you harvest what you reap, and I can't expect to reap. I mean, sometimes there's good fortune, and sometimes there's good luck. When we've started, I mean, I've done a lot of stuff, but I think the biggest boost I had was, right when we started our podcast, Joe Rogan contacted me and said, "Oh, I would love to get you on the Joe Rogan show," and that was sort of, I was friends with him, and we did martial arts together for years, but it was also like a stroke of luck. He didn't know I had just started a podcast 2 months earlier, and it's sort of like all our numbers went through the roof after that interview, and I got so much feedback, and there was like millions of hits on the Joe Rogan clips that they put out, and so sometimes there is this serendipity, but also if I didn't put in the work of living in the ashram, studying this stuff, touring with my band, it probably would have been, if he asked me, creating a podcast like you do, like the work that goes into it, it's a hustle. And so if I hadn't done that and put in that time, then I would have been on the podcast and there would have been no traction there. So so in one, we also create our good fortune. It's not like, oh, that guy's a lucky duck, The guy who's like, whatever, doing track and field or making hitting foul shots. It's not because they're lucky. It's because they sit there and practice when no one else is practicing, whether it's sports, music, photography, martial arts, etc.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Grateful Podcast. I'm interrupting to let you know that it would mean the world to me if you could share this episode with someone that you think would enjoy it, or leave a review down below so I can learn what I can do better and what I'm doing well with this podcast. It's a passion project, and I really want it to turn into something that helps people everywhere. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. So, can I call you a retired monk? I like that.
Yeah, I'm a
Yeah.
retired monk.
So, being a retired monk, how do you continue that practice? Because obviously you're not putting in the, I'd like to get to that afterward too, like what it was like actually in the ashram, but obviously it's not the same amount of work you're putting in towards your spirituality and your spiritual practices now that you're living in society. But what do you do to keep it up and to keep a clear state of mind?
That's a good question. You have to carve out time in the morning, like you said you do. You have some meditational practice. You have a meditational practice in the morning. You have a meditational practice in the evening time. And for me, that's done with chanting on beads.
Okay.
It's done with personal, rituals. I have like an altar in the house, and it's done with singing. The path of Bhakti that I'm on is done with like singing. It's done, like offering prayers through song, yeah. But it's also a training to take the practice. So you have like very like almost like fundamental regimented practices, say in the morning and the evening, but then that is meant to bleed throughout the course of the day. For example, I was just driving to Trader Joe's to go food shopping, and I'm listening to lectures on my way home that are uplifting and inspiring, and they're you can listen to anything in life. You can listen to the radio, you can listen to this, but if you're listening to spiritual truths on a regular basis, it keeps you sober in the course of the day. So we are what we do on our downtime. So living in the ashram, there was no downtime. It was like 24/7 seva or service. But when you have a family and you have a home and you have bills and you have expenses, you gotta somehow power pack your day, sandwich your day with maybe spiritual pieces of bread and whatever you're doing in the middle. That you have to somehow create a bridge towards your own personal liberation, your personal spiritual pursuits. And so, like I said, I'm driving to the supermarket, but I'm listening to things that are sort of uplifting and inspiring. I could have been listening to true crime. I could have been listening to something that's going to sort of degrade my consciousness. And sometimes I will. Sometimes I'll just listen to something or other. But here's the deal: the rule is ultimately we can do whatever we want, but we have to pay for it. The other side, for example, I was mentioning true crime because I remember once we got a new car and it came with whatever that radio station is. Sirius FM, and I turned it on, and there was like a true crime thing on while I was taking my kids to school, and I thought it was a little violent, so I waited till they got out of the car. But then I listened to it, and it completely drew me in, and I was like, "Oh my God, I want to listen to this later." So I picked up the kids from school, and on the way to picking them up, I listened to it again, and it was like, and then I got into, and like 3 days in a row, I did this, and next thing you know, it's like, everyone's out there trying to murder me. I mean, I'm thinking in my mind, this person could be a murderer. This person be these things I've never thought about. Now it's like it's impregnated me with all these like really like dark thoughts, and I was like, oh, I get it. You can do whatever we want in this life, and the beautiful thing about the wisdom literature of India, the Bhagavad Gita, the entire book is a book of wisdom, and at the end, Krishna, who is Bhagavan, who's God, tells Arjuna, his devotee, he said, listen, I've gave you a bunch of information. Now you do whatever you like. And that's how we find love in this world. I told you I loved you, and now if you want to come to me, you can come to me. And so in the same way, there are rules to follow, but they're not rules to hinder you. They're not rules to imprison you. They're rules to enhance your life, Don't eat donuts for breakfast. That's a rule. You don't have to follow it, but if you do, you'll find that it's going to affect your digestion. It'll make you fall asleep. If you're going to school, it's not the best for your overall health and well-being. It's made with trans fatty oil, whatever it is. My point is there are rules for our body. There's rules for our thoughts. There's rules for our lifestyle, and those rules should be there to enhance our life. They're not. We tend to think of rules; they inhibit our freedom, but rules are meant to enhance our freedom. If I say we're going to choose to drive on the right-hand side of the road in the United States, I can't just say, well, these stupid rules. Who's trying to control me? No, they're trying to create some particular rule for the benefit of everybody involved. If I want to start driving on the left, I'm going to go into head on. I'm not going to get to work. They're not going to get to work, and I'm just going to cause disaster. So there is, I think people who do a 12-step program, they get this. People who are athletes, they get this. People who are martial artists or musicians, they get this. Teachers are good. Rules are good. Doing whatever you want, whenever you want, that's a problem. That's the reason why people end up in 12-step programs or in recovery programs or rehab.
I think that rules are good to a certain point, and they're liberating to a certain point. But like you said, you have the choice to break a rule. Like, for example, I just am going back on like a more whole diet right now, like eliminating processed foods.
Yeah.
And for that, it's like, this is a thing, I'm not going to break the rules. But like, if in the rest of my life, like, obviously this is a trend, I want to eat less processed foods, but that doesn't mean I can never have ice cream again in my life or something like, or pizza, right? And so obviously I'll probably feel the consequences of that in my body.
Exactly.
But to trade off, I'm willing to accept. I don't want to be so black and white on one thing, but I also don't want to eat whatever the hell I want to eat at any point in time, because the consequences of that are going to be massive.
And I think as you grow older, you start to know yourself better as well. Some people really need to draw lines in the sand with their diet. I've met people who at a young age said, I don't eat processed food, and I just don't eat processed food, period. And I've seen them follow that their entire life, and now they're in their 70s. And I've seen some people say, you know what, I don't work well with too much, too many lines in the sand. I need a little bit of freedom, or else they sort of freak out and snap. So I think you get to know yourself as you get older, and then sometimes you feel like, actually maybe it would be good for me to have some rules. We start to realize all of us have some strengths and all of us have some weaknesses. And I don't hate myself for my weaknesses, but I just realize that those weaknesses have to be regulated. If they can't be cut off completely, they have to be some of those passions have to be regulated.
Right. Yeah. So jumping into something a little different here, you are what you practice is Bhakti yoga, what you teach and practice, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I looked that up, the first thing I read was, and this I wrote it down here to remember. It's a mouthful. Synonymous for an intimate understanding of oneness and harmony of the eternal individual with the divine and all creatures. And so I thought that was
that's a pretty good one.
Yeah, I thought that was super interesting. And it reminded me of, I've read a lot of books on Buddhism where it's talked about like non-duality and this concept of oneness.
Yeah.
And it's the most confusing thing I've ever, I somewhat understand it intellectually, but at the same time, I don't feel like I'll ever be able to fully grasp this concept that I am everything, or there is no me, right? So I wanted to pick your brain on that a little bit. And do you understand this, or is it still something you're working toward grasping?
Let me try to explain it, because there's three different things going on. The first one is, well, the first one, maybe there's four different things. The first one is there's nothing. We are all nothing, and everything is nothing. There's like a type of atheism where we're just here for a few days flapping around, and we live and die, and it makes no difference. And we've just created meaning in our lives. We've created ethics and rules. But ultimately, if I kill you, or you kill me, or I fall in love, you fall in love, it all means nothing, because we're just chemicals. Truthfully, that's what they're teaching in public schools. That is the truth behind chemistry, is that we are just chemical beings. There's no spirit. There's no soul. We're just a bunch of chemicals. And if you die, that's like a chemical spill. That's it. So then a lot of us grew up in a Abrahamic tradition, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and they have this idea of there is a higher power, and very oftentimes it's got a heavy twist of shame and guilt within there. Not all the time, but a lot of times it's filled with like, God will punish you for your sins, or you were born sinful, or I have a jealous God. These are all written into, the Old Testament or the New Testament. There's a jealous, my God, my Lord is a jealous Lord. And so God is almost, it's beyond, a lot of people growing up in these traditions, they have this very peculiar authoritarian relationship with God. Sometimes it's loving, but sometimes it's a lot of people turned away from the religion they grew up with because God seemed coercive. Like, follow me or you're going to go to hell forever. Not for a couple days, forever, eternally. And a lot of us just were like, I don't like this. I don't like the way that sounds. That sounds like God is a sadist. That's like saying, okay, Jack, you're my son and you came home late. You're 18. You're supposed to be home at 11. You got home at 2 in the morning. I want you to go to your room. And you're like, oh, man, all right, how long are you going to punish me for? I'm going to punish you forever, and then I'm going to set your room on fire. Like, there's no loving exchange. Like, if you were my son and I punished you, it's so you would rectify your bad behavior. There's actually some caring and some love, and so I take away some of your, I take away your allowance, I take away this. Why? So you grow up into be a better, mature, more responsible young man. But when I'm doing it to just grind your face in the dirt eternally, that's not a loving God. That's not a responsible parent. That's like a sadist type of a parent. So that's a lot of us were taught that's who God is. And so we got to this point where like, I sort of like God, but I don't like that concept of God. So then kick in the 1960s and you find the Upanishads and the Bhagavad, and these impersonalist versions of the Bhagavad Gita or Buddhism, where they say, you know what? You've been fearing God the whole time, but guess what? You are God. God is within you. We are all God. And that became very, very attractive to a lot of people because they realized there's an importance of spirit, but actually we are all spiritual person. And also there is this pure soul theology that the soul is not born sinful. The soul is actually pure. We just forgot. And it's almost like if there's a light and I put like a blanket over the light, and then I put another blanket, and then I put 100 blankets over that same light bulb, the light's still bright. It's just covered. So the concept is there needs to be a cleansing process to take away these layers that are covering the bright light. We are all bright lights, but we're covered. And what are we covered by? Lust, greed, anger, envy, competition, pride, arrogance, all those things. So the Vedic perspective or the Eastern perspective is that we are all bright lights. We've just forgot, and we're identifying with this temporary world as reality, and it's that attachment's creating suffering. So the path of Bhakti is slightly even more nuanced than that. It's sort of a combination of both worlds, whereas I am a spirit soul, but God is my source. I am like God, but I'm finite. If I take an eyedropper of water from the Pacific Ocean, in one sense, it's qualitatively one with the ocean, right? It has the exact same elements under a microscope as the ocean is, but quantitatively, it's minute. Where qualitatively it's the same. So I am one with God in the sense like I'm a spark. Like a spark is part of a giant inferno. In one sense it is. It has all the qualities of the inferno, but it is minute. And because it's minute, because it's marginal, it can also be slightly extinguished by its environment. And you have people in your life, I'm sure, that they extinguish your spiritual side, your grateful side, your connected side, your meditational side. You might be going, might have a friend, hey, come on, let's go. We're going to go do this tonight. And you're like, well, I got to meditate for 15 minutes. And then he's like, what are you, an idiot? Come on, let's just go. And you're like, oh, all right. So we have friends that take us out of our centered self. And then we have friends that when you get around them, they're like, oh, you're meditating? Oh, great. After we meditate, let's read something or let's whatever. You know what I mean? So you have friends that ignite your spiritual side. So this is the thing about us as being marginal sparks of that fire. We can either ignite by the company we keep or we can be extinguished by the company we keep. So we're in a very precarious situation because even though we're spiritual, we're easily covered by illusion. And this philosophy is called Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva, simultaneously one with God and yet different than God. And to me, that makes more sense than I am God. Because if I am God, I get it, but why am I an illusion if I'm God? How can God go into illusion? Or how some Buddhists would say, Buddhism came out of that Upanishadic, I don't know if that's a word, Upanishad thought, where instead of saying we are all one, within Buddhism said we're all nothing.
Yes.
And that was something, even though I really like Buddhism as like a thinking process, and I appreciated the disciplining of the mind and the compassion of the heart, but the destiny, the final destination is, and I hear a lot of my students say the same thing, it's like, I was a Buddhist, but I really want God in my life. And a lot of Buddhism has really put any concept of a higher power out, and it's turned it more into a discipline of the mind, into a nothingness. And whenever there's a nothingness, there'll be a sadness as well, because we are not nothing. We are actually something. We are something quite wonderful, but we're covered over, and we don't realize that. So we are a pure spiritual being. We just forgot. And spiritual enlightenment is about remembering what we have forgotten. Instead of using the silly identity of I'm an Italian American in New York or Italian, Democrat, Republican, straight, gay, trans. No, those are silly, temporary designations. That's like me saying I'm a Subaru or a pickup truck. Those are like all rental vehicles, which you're going to go to your new town and you're in a new car. We're just renting these vehicles for a short moment in history. And because of that, I think I have a gray beard. You think you're 18 years old. You're not 18 years old. You're an eternal being. The matter is changing at every moment. So the Bhagavad Gita, the Buddhist teachings, the Upanishads, they all teach similar to this point, which is the material body is actually just temporary. It's not us whatsoever. It's like a rented vehicle. And it's always in the process of flux. It's always in that process of change. Right? My 5-year-old body is no longer here. It's back in the earth. Well, what is here then? The only thing that is here, according to Vedic tradition, is spirit. The spirit is noticing the body changing. Spirit is noticing my hair falling out, my hair turning gray, right? That's what spirit is noticing. So the process of waking up from the dream is that's a spiritual pursuit, because we're living in a world of shadows where things appear to be real, but they're actually like you can remember when you were 12, right? That wasn't that long ago. If you're 18 or 6 years ago, you're 12 years old. You're riding a bike. Your dad and mom are the coolest people in the universe. You know what I mean? They're the smartest people in the universe. You just learned how to do a wheelie with your bike, and that was now you look back at that, it's like a dream. It's almost like it's a dream, and the yogis say it is a dream. You know why? Because it was temporary. Just like if I had a dream last night, I was being attacked by a tiger. And I woke up in a cold sweat. I woke up in fear. I had to take a shower because I was so disturbed by the dream. But was it real or was it fabricated? The answer is it's a little bit of both, right? I woke up, my heartbeat was racing. I was sweating. I was actually in fear. But there was actually no tiger. Why? Because it was just temporary. It was just all in my mind. This world that we think is so solid is the same way. It's just very temporary, and we're immersed in it as the all in all. And we have to zoom out and see our life as much bigger than this little incarnation of Raghunath Ray Cappo and Jack Wagoner. This is just a moment in time. And as we zoom out rather, we'll see, wow, this whole identity, I'm just here for a moment in time. Doesn't mean we should kill ourselves because it's not important. It is important. Our life's incredibly significant. But we have significant work to do in this world to wake up to this consciousness. And it's not just a flick of a switch. It's a practice. In the same way, I just say, I want to get great at violin. I'm just going to be great. Okay, but that's a practice now. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's you covered everything right there.
Covered all your questions in one loud statement.
That was awesome. Yeah, one of the things I found fascinating about that is when people say we are nothing, it feels like, yeah, you said stuff that sounded nihilistic while also saying stuff that sounded so meaningful at the same time, and it's not at all nihilistic, even though it's hard for me to
well, it can be nihilistic if that's your absolute final conclusion of your spiritual teachings, that it's all nothing. I think that is a little nihilistic. That's why I don't follow that path as the end game, because I believe that there is the highest thing, and in Bhakti we believe the highest thing is a pure, unadulterated love, not an alloy of love, which is mixed with I want my desires fulfilled, and then you give me a little bit back. But it's pure love of God. And that's considered a very high, unalloyed love would be the highest. And I'm open to hear if anything's higher than pure love of God. But to me, that sounds like Bhakti is really just a great definition. The idea of oneness, I get, but I like the idea of we are one, but also tiny. Because
we're a part of.
Yeah, because it doesn't hold it. It can't hammer out. If I am one with God, if I am God, then how can I be an illusion? I just can't get my head around that, And then and within Buddhism, like I said, I appreciate it because it was a real sort of mental dissection of the mind, of the senses, But if what some of these teachers within Buddhism say, well, ultimately there's nothing. Well, then why am I working so hard meditating if there's nothing? What's the difference if I sit and meditate for 10 hours or just put a knife in your neck? If there's nothing, if that is the absolute truth, if that's nothing, then who cares? Yeah. And then my next question is, what's the source of nothing? What's like...
That's a big one.
What's the source of nothing? Who's dreaming of this nothing? So the yogis say, no. It's something. It's just not what it appears to be. And that's where this phrase or this concept of Maya comes in, M-A-Y-A, which even the Buddhists have Maya. Maya is the force or the energy of illusion. And that's where you get this idea of it's not what it appears to be. Just like Shakespeare said, a baited hook, right? There's a baited hook. It looks like a worm. But no. There's a hook behind that worm. Don't trust the fisherman. He's got a plan for you, fish. So in the same sense, the whole material world, like, it looks enjoyable. Like I could just grab it. And then we find there's so much complications with these pursuits of the material world. It's complicated, and it generally ties our heart and our mind in knots. And so how do I engage with this world where I connect with my joy, but not get caught in the glue trap of material pursuits? You know what I mean by a glue trap? You might have to go get a corporate job and figure that out.
Explain it real quick.
Glue trap, a glue trap is like you put your foot in, you try to get your foot out, then your hand gets caught. Then your hand gets caught and your other hand gets caught. It's like you just can't move. You just can't move anymore. The material world has a way of doing that. Well, I fell in love. Oh, and she got pregnant, and then we have this child, and now I got to work to support the child, and then I don't even like this job, and I don't even think my wife likes me anymore, and this kid hates me now that he's grown up, and we're trying to find this Hollywood idea of what life should be like. And then even if it is Hollywood-like, someone that you love will die. So the material world when you analyze it, it is dreamlike. It is like a sandcastle. It is heartbreaking. But that doesn't mean we should just throw the whole damn thing out. It means we have to find out something more subtle. And we find our solid within the subtle, not within the external world.
That's beautiful. All right, you asked. I think it's time for you to go. I'll let you
Yeah,
go,
thank you.
but before you get out, just let my audience know where they can find you so they can hear more of your stuff.
Sure. The Instagram is Raghunath Yogi, Raghunath, Yogi, and my website is Raghunath, Raghunath, dot yoga. You can do a dot yoga nowadays. Dot yoga, and every
Pretty
year
cool.
I take people on trips to holy places in India. I do that every autumn. I do yoga trainings in January in India. We have a farm that I live on, and we do weekend retreats here in upstate New York. And you can direct message me or write me via my website. And check out our podcast, Wisdom of the Sages, wherever you get podcasts, or check out my new book. You can get it on Amazon or Audible, which is called From Punk to Monk by Ray Cappo.
I'm gonna read that. I'm excited to check that out.
You'll like it, I think. It's
Yeah.
entertaining as well. And
Awesome.
you'll find yourself in the pages as well, because I can tell you're a thinker and a deep thinker.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on, Ray.
Thank you, my brother.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Grateful Podcast featuring Raghunath Ray Cappo. Ray is truly a wise guy. He's done so much in his life, from punk artist to monk, and I truly respect everything he's doing right now as well. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends, and leave a great review down below so I know what I can do better in the future. Have a great week.